Hi, welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker. You know, the Bible tells us that how can two walk together unless they are agreed? And we're at a real critical point here in our nation. We have two distinct worldviews. We saw one worldview last summer. We saw one worldview January 6th. And now here in Washington, D.C., the intensification of these two worldviews are in our Congress. And so we're going to talk about today is that commission that Nancy Pelosi has developed out to look into the incidents of January 6th. We'll get into a little bit of Donald Trump and what was that movement about. We know that MAGA is a movement. MAGAism is a movement. It's not about one leader. We saw the Tea Party before he showed up. We know that there's a problem in the country. You have progressives that want one thing. They want to transform our country into some type of Marxist utopia. And I use that word utopia lightly because it's a fantasy that they think will work here. It's never worked anywhere else throughout history, anywhere else, but that's what they want, which means all control over all of our decisions, including then banning the Bible, because on the other side, you have people that really believe the scripture. They want to believe the scripture, they want to live their life by the scripture, and there are some conflicts in scripture and what progressives are saying is truth. There are conflicts in discovering truth. So we're going to have to here on Cure America try to sort through some of this noise to find some truth on the issue of the commission, the issue of January 6th, what's happening to the detainees that are being held because of January 6th here in Washington, D.C., and where do we go from here? Are we going to end up in a culture war? So I have a very distinguished panel. You're going to hear from Congressman Louis Gohmert. You're going to hear from one of my pastor friends to try to help us get to some truth here, get to determine, if we can even go on like this. What's going to happen next? I don't know. And I hope that you don't know because we don't know. But what we do know is God is true. He's still on the throne. And I'm going to come back with this information about what's going on here in Washington, D.C. and where these folks think that we should go from here. And at the end of the show, maybe we will know. Maybe we will be able to discover for ourselves how to walk through all of the noise that we're hearing today. I'll be right back after this important message.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education, headquartered in Washington, D.C., Cure works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. Cure's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Cure. Join with us. And there has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Star Parker here at the D.C. jail, where many of the folks who were here in Washington, D.C. on January 6th are being held with many of those that are already in the jail as convicted criminals. This is a really interesting scene. A few of the congressmen were just here attempting to get into the jail and were put out. We need to know what's going on inside, especially as tensions are rising on Capitol Hill. I'll catch up with Louis Gohmert, congressman from the great state of Texas, a little later on. They're going to leave from here and go back to the Capitol Hill to demand action on what's taking place inside of the jail. As most of us know from the activities of January 6th, many of the charges against those that have been held here for 6 months have been simple misdemeanors. Some people are getting time for 6 months, but then time served. But it's our understanding that some are not even able to talk to family and friends, to lawyers. So we want to get to the truth. I've attempted to get inside. Our team from Urban Cure is here trying to get inside. We have not been able to, so we decided to join up with some congressional leaders today. And our team was kicked out, as well as the congressional leaders themselves. I'll be back to you in a moment. Star Parker here in Washington, D.C. at the D.C. jail, demanding answers about January 6th.
We don't want to intervene in any specific case, but we had gotten reports that federal facilities were mistreating, abusing people that had been arrested on January 6th, having been to Guantanamo more than once. I know that the people there, just from what little we saw from the outside, they're being treated worse there than the bloodthirsty terrorists at Guantanamo. It is really outrageous. So we wanted to see. I've toured many facilities back in Texas. I'll get invitations to come tour facilities, even if they're state. As a felony judge, I toured jails and prisons. I felt part of my job as a member of Congress. I've toured prisons before. It's no big deal. Normally, those in charge of a federal prison facility or jail detention facility, they're glad to have you see because they don't want any stories about unfair treatment that are unfounded. The way you get rid of that is to allow people to see what you're doing. So we went down there and we went in, showed our IDs, asked to see the facilities, wanted a tour, and we were willing to wait. We knew it would be difficult, but since they have refused to respond at all to our letters, to our requests, then it creates more concern. So we go down and we just say, we want to see, we want a tour. And eventually, after a long wait, we were told, oh, you've got to put a mask on. Fine, we all put on masks. And then eventually, a lady came out in uniform and said, well, you're trespassing, you've got to get out. And I said, trespassing? Where'd you get that? You know, we've got these federal congressional ideas. We're the ones that have oversight over you. We're the ones that have to vote to whether we keep this facility open, whether we're going to fund another one or close this. We vote on those things. We have oversight. I've never been denied access. I've been welcomed in federal facilities before. And she said, well, you're trespassing. And I said, so what makes you say that? I checked with my supervisor and they're telling me you're trespassing. I said, well, can you get the supervisor down there? I would like to have that discussion. And so we were told the supervisor was coming, and there was another officer that came down, had 3 stripes, was apparently a sergeant, but she went straight outside. She didn't stop to talk to us. So I asked, where's the supervisor? And one of the other detention facility employees said, well, that's her right out there. So I went outside to speak to her, and I was followed by other members. And when we got outside, she ran around and went back in the facility, and they locked the door. They locked the door. And all this time, there are people going in, coming out. So I know from my days as a judge and my trials in federal court and state court, we're very careful about the evidence we let before a jury. But there is an inference that can be taken when someone has control of evidence. In this case, the conditions and the treatment in this federal Bureau of Prison facility, they've got total control of it, and they hide it. They refuse to allow anybody that wants to see it to come in. Then a judge can instruct a jury, you may take the inference then from that fact. They have total control. They won't let anybody see the evidence. Then you can infer that they are violating people's rights. They are doing wrong to inmates. They are abusing them. Otherwise, there would be no reason. I mean, with all the prison and jails I've toured, without any incident, any problem, as a congressman and as a former judge, there's no reason not to let us in unless they have something to hide, and clearly they do. We're not trying to interfere in any case, but we do want to know the conditions and whether or not there's abuse. And it's, as lawyers say all the time in court, I take it by your silence. The answer is yes. There is abuse. It is an abomination that they will not allow any oversight of whatever abuses they're involved in.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., Cure works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. Cure's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Cure. Join with us. And there has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Yeah, very serious concerns for the country. Very, very serious. So I have my distinguished panel. You know most of them that are on the panel today. I only have 3 here, but you're just getting to know my friend Peter. But in the meantime, you know Sarah Perry. Thank you. We need a lawyer here. Uh-oh, you're in Jonathan's seat.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you know, one of the reasons Jonathan's not here is because of the topic we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Their agency, their law firm are looking into all of those detainees, and some of them are their clients. So
Yes.
Thank you for taking the legal chair today. You're a legal fellow with the Heritage Foundation. You joined Heritage after you were over at the Department of Education. Long resume for a young woman. So I really appreciate that you're going to be bringing some insight into this very, very serious topic. And Peter, you're new with us, but thank you. Peter Roff, but Peter is not new in Capitol Hill. Peter, he's been on every kind of network forever. In fact, he was my mentor. I was just following after him and saying, I want to be like him when I grow up. But now you're over at Newsweek magazine.
Contributing editor for Newsweek magazine.
Contributing editor for Newsweek. Well, good. I'm surprised that they have somebody conservative over there, but it's a good thing. I think that we should stay in the mainstream, that we should keep our voices alive. And so thank you for coming in on this one. This is going to be an interesting discussion. And with Rick, my co-author on Necessary Noise. Boy, is this noise necessary right now. Rick is also the president of Americans for Limited Government. I think that that's why we became very fast friends. Not to mention we're both from California, we're both born-again Christian, and we're both major activists, and I really appreciate it. That you are here on this panel. It's going to be a little longer panel today because we have 2 things going on, guys. We got this commission. A lot of people are saying, what are they even attempting to look for? And then we have detainees. We have a real challenge in our country. There's so much focus on January 6th. There's so much discussion about vaccine. There's so much just noise out there. So we have to sort through it. And Rick, I'm going to start with you because you know, we just heard from Congressman Gohmert. He was attempting to get in the jail. We're hearing about these challenges that perhaps are going on inside of a federal detention center where they've been holding hundreds, and now we're down to 37 are still in jail. Mm-hmm. 18 have been arrested since January. We're hearing stories, and so at Cure we were trying to get in anyway to get a camera in there and see if some of these stories are true. I have been saying, hey, even a skinhead deserves his day in court. Let's just pretend we're going to believe the narrative of the left, you know, that these are just a bunch of domestic terrorists, which I'm glad that my panel is here to tell you more about these folks that they're holding because they're not domestic terrorists. But Rick, you were there when we tried to get the cameras in and we got kicked out. In fact, they said we were trespassing. They said that congressmen, elected officials were trespassing on a federal jail. Give us some insight into what you saw that day.
Well, first of all, it's pretty outrageous because what the members of Congress were doing is they were actually in the public lobby of the jail facility, a lobby that anybody can walk into and go to the front desk and say, hey, I'm here for whatever purpose. And so they went there, and this is after multiple attempts to get an answer about the disposition of the cases as a whole from the jail. And so they went there to, after not getting a response, and to say, hey, we're here, can we get some answers? And what happened instead was they were accused of trespassing on public property that the federal taxpayer pays for, and then got locked out of the jail. My purpose, you know, my observation is that there is a real problem, because we can at least should be able to expect that members of Congress should be able to provide oversight into things that are actually covered by Congress, that the people are paying for. And each of the members who were there had a specific oversight responsibility from a subcommittee to be able to oversee what's going on there. They controlled their dollars, then that's their job. And being denied the ability to do their job is denying the American people the ability to have actual oversight and control over how their dollars are spent.
Well, and especially when you're starting to hear reports that there could be abuse, that people are very discouraged in the legal process. Peter, one of the reasons that I'm thankful that you're here is because as a journalist, I mean, there's something broken down here. We went to the press conference over at the Capitol right after they kicked us off of the federal property, our public property, at where they're holding the detainees, and very few press were there. This is a story that should be headlined, not just because of the commission, not just because the Capitol was being breached on January 6th, but because they're holding Americans that we're hearing are not getting that due process that they deserve.
Star, there's a lot to unpack in this story. And I think that for a lot of people in the mainstream media, they think that the people who were involved in any way in the January 6th invasion of the Capitol deserve whatever they get, and that any even neutral coverage of their detention is somehow to the benefit of Donald Trump, whom they tried to destroy from the moment that he announced he was running for president. Now, I find it interesting that when we arrested suspected terrorists after the World Trade Center was incinerated by Al-Qaeda terrorists, we had lots of concerns from Capitol Hill, from the media, from civil society groups like the ACLU about the due process rights of the people that were being held. We've heard continued complaints about the due process rights of the people who have been detained at the U.S. detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, people who were seized in battle by the U.S. military. We worry about their due process. There is a movement in this country sponsored by liberal financiers like George Soros to end cash bail because they worry about the impact of bail on the due process of certain socioeconomic and demographic groups. Right. There has been no discussion about the due process rights of the people who are being detained right now for possible participation in what happened on January 6th. There is clearly a double standard here because this is such a politically charged issue. Right. And that, unfortunately, is what makes it so dangerous for the integrity of the Constitution. People don't want to touch it because they don't want to touch the politics, which means they are afraid to stand up for what's right.
Well, that's a very dangerous place to be in. And when you're talking about the numbers of arrests, some are saying that there are over 500 were arrested. There could be another 300 waiting to be arrested. Clearly, this was not an organized insurrection the way that the left is trying to portray it. Anyone can see that, that it was just not an organization going on. If it was, they were really lousy at their job. So, Sarah, I am, or their mission. I'm concerned. I'm concerned, especially about what Peter just said, about what Rick saw. You're a lawyer. Where are we on this? What is it that we should be knowing about our country at this point? I mean, there are people that are really now ready for an insurrection.
Yes, and I will say that part of this stems from the fact that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision early on into the summer, United States versus Munchkin, in which they made a distinction specifically about who among the insurrection could be held without bail and who could be released on their own recognizance with bail. So the remaining individuals who are still in prison are 37 individuals who have been charged either with assault, battery, trespass, conspiracy, more violent crimes. But it's the first of its kind because it's the first time a federal judge, a federal panel, has had to determine what is tantamount to an offense sufficient enough to deprive an individual of that constitutional right to their own liberty. So that's particularly problematic here. It's also strategic. So we know that these prosecutors recognize that if these individuals are kept in jail, it is much easier to enter into a plea agreement. So understanding that there is an opportunity to get these individuals to plead guilty, there is a higher incentive to make sure that they are not released on their own recognizance. And that's problematic as well.
That is very problematic. In fact, this is one of the challenges that we've dealt with in our minority communities for a long time.
Yes.
The politics behind holding someone and the pressure to try to get them to do things that perhaps are not in their best interest. But that's interesting, the point you made, that they knew early on to separate the two groups.
Yes.
But now, Rick, you know, and I run in a lot of the same circles, and we know that there are people that were detained for quite some time, and the charge is trespassing.
Right.
The charge is trespassing on property that they were allowed to enter in.
And in essence, that's exactly right. One of the, you talk about fundamental things. Our country is based upon, our entire judicial system is based upon a simple precept that you're innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. And by this federal court decision, the federal court has said, no, the prosecution can declare you guilty before you've actually faced a jury of your peers. That is a direct constitutional question.
Yes.
And it goes to the heart of who we are as a country. And I don't care if it's a skinhead, if it's an Antifa person, I don't care who it is.
Right.
Every person in America has that fundamental expectation.
That's right.
That they're innocent until proven guilty, that they're going to be able to get competent counsel.
That's right.
That if
That's what separates us from so many other countries. And two of the amendment. You got the Fifth Amendment. You got the Sixth Amendment. This is getting.
And I would argue that that if anybody who's currently held in the D.C. jail, for them to get a fair trial, it has to be outside of D.C.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because Peter, I want you to weigh in any time. I don't want this round robin because from what Sarah's saying, they've already and you're saying they've already been declared guilty, so it's questionable if they're going to get a fair trial anywhere. It's even questionable if they should be tried at this point because
I think that may be why the federal government is pressing so many of these people to take deals.
Yeah.
Because they know that they can't get a fair trial, and this is a serious question because the media has poisoned the atmosphere. Having been on Capitol Hill, overlooking what was going on, watching it unfold live, in some cases we saw people trying to break down doors and windows, successfully break down doors and windows. And in other cases, we saw people who appeared to be Capitol Police officers opening doors for people and waving them on in like it was a regular day and they were tourists. And there were pictures inside of the fellow carrying the Confederate flag and the fellow sitting in Nancy Pelosi's office and the fellow climbing into the presiding officer's chair in the Senate chamber, all of which is disrespectful, shameful, and an attack on everything that we believe.
Everything.
But then we also see pictures of people just walking on the red carpet in between the pipe and drape, like they were on a tour of the U.S. Capitol.
Right.
There are different
we know
degrees.
A variety of people were in town.
Yeah, there were different degrees of offense here, but everyone has been lumped together.
Okay.
And this again is a serious problem.
Right.
It has been discussed in trials like the Sam Shepard murder case in Cleveland in the 1950s, whether or which sort of set the tone up to now for an evaluation of how the press can poison the atmosphere of a trial. And I don't believe that anyone who is put up on charges of having been part of what the left is calling an insurrection could receive a fair trial in any court in the United States at this point, any more than Donald Trump was able to receive a fair trial in front of the U.S. Senate after his due process rights were violated by Nancy Pelosi and the House during the impeachment. You know, it's fascinating. Even today, due process is about more than court. It means you can't be deprived of your life, your liberty, or your property without due process.
Without due process.
And
That's
yesterday, the Biden administration violated due process by unconstitutionally and illegally extending the eviction moratorium, even after the Supreme Court had said it can't be done. Biden said, I know it's illegal. I'm doing it anyway because it's good for the
This
people.
is just total
no
lawlessness.
respect for due process, lawlessness. This isn't socialism. No. This is an effort. This isn't some organized political philosophy. No. This is an effort to upend everything that you and I and Rick and Sarah might consider normal. Right. Up is down, black is white, east is west, peace is war, Orwell rules.
And
it is frightening.
People are it is very frightening. And I think people are afraid enough that they're ready to take up arms, that people are saying, you want to call us insurrectionists? Watch this.
Well, that would be bad.
Well, it would be bad.
So no one is confused.
But wait a minute
that would be bad.
You can be on record saying that that's bad. But my question then to Sarah and even to Rick is that bad becomes subjective when you're talking about a civil war, or you're talking about even a revolutionary war. When people find that they are under attack, and when they find that their constitutional core principles are under attack, they might be ready to throw some tea into the ocean.
I think there was such a longstanding fomenting of sort of violent rhetoric, and the concept that Trump himself was an illegitimate president the first time around. There were so many opportunities and attempts to essentially put up a barrier wall against all of his policies, the first impeachment attempt, constant rhetoric from the media.
And every time they were doing that, they were talking about 70 million people.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
So there was very, I have to tell you, there is a part of me that was not surprised by the outcome on January 6th. And it's heartbreaking, and we know the individuals who took up mob rule were obviously wrong, but to a certain extent, when you are constantly fed the narrative that your leader is illegitimate.
That the qualification that we know they're wrong, because some people are still debating about John Brown during the Civil War.
First of all, Americans for Limited Government, I released a statement immediately while this was happening, saying it was wrong. Okay, so let's just be clear. It was not what should have happened. That doesn't mean I don't understand the things that came together to cause people to do that. But the vast majority of people in that Capitol were taking selfies. There wasn't a single statue that was overturned. There wasn't a single piece of art that was hurt. In fact, the toll at the end of the day was doors and windows got broken, but little else got disturbed.
Okay, but wait a minute.
But let me make the point I was going to make. The challenge that I don't think we can ignore is these people are being pled out. Okay, and let's go back to what that means, because they are being coerced into saying things about what motivated them. And in saying what motivated them, what they're really doing is making a case that Donald Trump's rhetoric is why that occurred.
We know that
his speech was violent.
And on the other side of the break, we're going to address that, because we're going to talk about the commission at that point. But you're begging the question then, the narrative that now we're hearing from the both of you is what we heard last summer as well, that when Black Lives Matters came on the scene and you had protests, others were saying these are peaceful protests, and others got involved. Antifa came and joined us. The domestic terrorists came and joined us. The thugs from the hood came and joined us, but we had legitimate reason to be in the street. How is this different?
More people were killed. More property was destroyed in the summer of peace and love by the anti-George Floyd protests than what happened on January 6th in Capitol Hill. But I reject the notion that some conservatives are saying this, not that. We need to stay focused on these as two separate incidents. As far as January 6th is concerned, there are people out there who advocate for violent revolution. The founders gave, and that is appropriate when there is no other mechanism available to change the government. The founders gave us an enduring system to replace governments we don't like with governments we like, and those are called elections. And this is why election integrity matters. People have to be able to trust that their vote counts, that their vote counts once, and nobody else's vote counts more than they do. President Trump's rhetoric on this has been over the top. He has obscured the ability of the rest of us to have a, I think, civil conversation about problems that existed in the 2020 election, because now you can't say anything against the 2020 election without the liberal progressives painting you as a Trump supporter.
That's right.
I have lots of concerns.
Immediately connected it to January 6th.
I believe Joseph Biden was sworn in as the president of the United States. He is the president of the United States. It is done.
Got another election
it is a settled question.
That's right.
That doesn't mean there weren't significant problems.
Huge problem.
With the 2020 elections,
That's right.
how the rules were written and by whom in the run up to the election, the use of non-request mail-in ballots, what the impact of that may have been in different states, the way people have uncovered things that need to be addressed, and rather than address them to ensure our confidence in the integrity of our elections, the dominant Washington culture just says, oh, Biden won, it's over, and if you won't say that Biden won, then you're an insurrectionist. That's not
And the
healthy
media is
for our democracy.
right along with it. The media is right along with it. I am so glad that you brought that up. And the segment went a little long, but you had to hear that point. We're going to be right back. And with the panel, we're going to transition from this. Maybe we got more to say even on election integrity, because this is critical to this discussion. And then we're going to look at this commission and see if that's even something that is politicized, polarized, and maybe not get to whatever it is they say that they're trying to get to. We'll get right back.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., Cure works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. Cure's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Cure, join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
It's really, this commission, this whole issue, it's certainly in Washington, D.C. alive. It's so alive in Washington, D.C. that no one is saying anything to each other. It's really bad. Everyone is afraid to text. Everyone is afraid to email. Everyone's even afraid of phone calls right now. There's something wrong with all of this in our country if we as American people are so now afraid even to talk to our neighbors. So I have lawyer Sarah, I have journalist Peter, and I have activist Rick Fair.
That's the most dangerous term in America.
I know, that's why I used it on you, Rick Manning. Really different. But I'm just going to throw it out there now. We're going to go no longer round robin. We're just going to talk over each other and do everything we can to try to get to the answer to the question. What is the commission looking for? Why are we still now 7 months later talking about January 6th, and we still have people in jail waiting for a so-called trial while they're pressuring them for, if we leave them long enough and they get beat up long enough, then maybe they'll just plea it out and go on back to their personal lives. What's going on?
I'll tell you what they're not looking for. They're not looking for the truth. They're not asking the question why Nancy Pelosi didn't have the National Guard there when she knew that this was being planned. She had lots of intelligence.
Okay,
she's
so
responsible.
Nancy Pelosi knew that this was being planned, that there was going to be a riot.
That there were at least people talking about it. And she rejected 3 requests that there be a National Guard presence at the Capitol. Nancy Pelosi is in charge of the Capitol, Capitol security.
Because she's
That's her job, because she's Speaker of the House. Mm-hmm. She's in charge of the Capitol Police. And so she did not provide the provisions to make certain that the situation could be stopped based on
Did
force.
you think she just didn't take it seriously? Or
she says it was the optics. She didn't want the optics of the Capitol occupied by what looked like the army, which is exactly what we got after January 6th. For months unnecessarily. But Nancy Pelosi wants 2 things. She wants to make sure that Donald Trump is never president of the United States again, because she's afraid of the 74 million Americans who voted for him in 2020. And she wants to make sure the Democrats have a continued majority in the House of Representatives. They have nothing to run on. They want to raise taxes. They want to destroy property rights. They're ruining the education system. They want to destroy the First Amendment. So what do they have left? They have Trump as an evil guy. And so they are trying to compile the information here so that they can run against every Republican member of Congress who voted to reject the results of any or all the states' electoral college submissions and say you fed the insurrection. You don't deserve to come back to Congress.
Not a single investigator has yet been appointed from FBI, DHS, DOD, so she is going to drag this out as long as possible, just in time for midterms. No investigators have yet been appointed by the House committee.
So then what are they doing?
So now they're holding hearings. They want to put on the dog and pony show,
They
bring
want to get
forward.
subpoenas now. They're going to start.
They will get subpoenas,
But no one's
absolutely.
investigating?
Well, that's not clear because this isn't a real committee. This is
Right.
a Nancy Pelosi appointed
Peter's exactly
commission.
right.
It is not a committee of the House. Its creation has not been approved by vote of the House of Representatives. So whether they can get investigators or subpoena power, which draws it into the legal arena, isn't clear. But investigators aren't going to help because, the FBI couldn't find a single Hillary email. They found 500 people who were on Capitol Hill, but they couldn't find a single Clinton email.
And that's the really important point. What we know is they are going to rehash ground that the FBI has already covered. This has been the most investigated incident probably in the history of our country, from at least in terms of the short time period. We have more agents devoted to this than anything right now.
This meeting, the
January 6th.
Like what happened?
And it's going to the point
finding the protesters.
Finding the protesters, and it's going to the point where the Orange County Register reported that a gentleman who was at the Capitol took a selfie of himself in the Capitol, didn't do anything. He just took a selfie, went in. But he was in a prayer group.
It's a public.
He was in a prayer group.
There were a couple of prayer groups that were there while the president was down at the Ellipse. And then there was another group that was at the Freedom Plaza. I was here, so we know that there were several groups in town. Tifa was here. Black Lives Matter was here.
He was in a prayer group in Huntington Beach, California, and one of his fellow prayer group members turned him in.
That he happened to be at
because
the Capitol
he'd been at the Capitol on January 6th.
Wow.
Now, trespassing is going to be hard to prove in some of these cases because it's a public building, and as we know, we have footage. There is footage of people who appear to be Capitol Hill police or Capitol Hill staff opening doors and waving people inside the building.
Right, and we know that many of these folks were visitors to Washington, D.C., so they didn't know it better.
None of that will be examined by the commission. I suspect that or the Pelosi committee. I expect that also.
So you're calling it a committee, not a commission.
Committee, whatever you want to call it. It's not a committee of the House of Representatives.
That is not a committee.
Of the House of Representatives, with all the attendant powers.
Right.
But I'm sure that they are not going to look into who killed Ashley Babbitt and why.
Right.
I don't think they're going to do anything to set the record straight about the other 4 people whose deaths are incorrectly attributed to the events of January 6th and violence. Right. 2 of them were health incidents that could have happened at any time. Right. The Capitol police officer who died of a stroke the day after. That could have happened at any time. Right. Exacerbated by the events of January 6th, maybe, but not conclusively.
A new Harvard-Harris poll shows that 58% of Americans, independents, Democrats, and Republicans, all believe that this is an incredibly biased committee. So not even individuals who are registered Democratic, for the most part, believe that what's being done is going to ultimately result in an unbiased truth.
Then why? Then what is the...
But we can't miss the fact that the defense is saying in the Michigan case, and I'll let Peter talk more about this, in the Michigan case where the governor was a group of people were supposedly going to try to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
The defense there is claiming that a majority, at least partial responsibilities, the FBI that had in fact infiltrated the group, brought people together, were calling people together to come to join them, and actually helped create the plot itself and setting the whole thing up.
The FBI, our systems are in trouble. Our institutions collapsed.
The FBI is problematic on a number of fronts and has been for some time.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the name of their building, Hoover, Dr. King could have told you that.
And President Trump missed the boat He had the opportunity when he fired James Comey to bring in a reform director who would at least try to set things right. I think Chris Wray was the wrong choice. I think there's no point in getting rid of him now because Biden will pick somebody equally bad. But the FBI needs serious reforms. They trample on the rights of ordinary citizens on a regular basis.
They do. You brought up President Trump, and he came in basically as a reform, if you will. I mean, it was just like, get in here. Let's do
certainly
something.
An agent of change.
What happened? What happened? Did he not know that the swamp is not just deep but it's dark? Did he not understand the tentacles? Why is it all unraveling, or is it?
Well, I actually don't think it's unraveling. I think the MAGA movement is alive and well, and I think that 2022 is going to pretend to see change, and that is why we're seeing this select committee extrapolate so much out of what was comparatively at least a similar experience than the protests during the Summer of Love in 2020. We're seeing very strategic moves on the parts of the Democrats indicating they are very concerned about 2022.
Well, and that's the numbers you were just saying that even their own party.
And that is why two non-Trump Republicans who were never Trumpers were appointed to the committee. It was a sort of token representation of, listen, we're representing GOP interests as well.
Yeah, but they were in the back of the room saying, pick me, pick me.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're running scared as well. And when you look at things like what's her name, Peggy Noonan, and all the rest of the never-Trumpers writing about this.
In terms of the actual politics of this, the Democrats right now, what you guys have said is true. The Democrats right now are scared to death because they're going to get creamed. But here's the thing that works. But here's what works in their favor. Every time people sit there and say the elections aren't being fairly held, their people aren't being suppressed. It's people who would want to overturn what's going on that are being suppressed. And it's why the most important things that are going on in this country right now are not in Washington, D.C. They're in the state levels where they're trying to get to the bottom of what happened.
I'm in 100% agreement with Rick. In fact, the Supreme Court dealt really a very big victory to state election integrity laws. It is in the states where these laws are passed. It is where we make sure that absentee ballot use is not being abused. Automatic registration is not taking place. Drop boxes are not being mishandled. So these two Arizona laws that were upheld in Brnovich versus DNC, huge win for the integrity that states have in their opportunities to hold these elections fairly.
It's part of a larger conversation about the states. And I wrote this for Newsweek 2 weeks ago, and it's still up at newsweek.com. That the Republican leadership here, which is basically fighting a trench warfare, World War I style stalemate in the Capitol, ought to be pointing to the Republican successes, the conservative ideas that are working out in the states where there are more Republican governors and Democrats. There are more Republican legislators than there are Democrats, and there are more Republicans controlling state legislators.
In 2020.
So the Republican Party is not down and out.
No,
here's what the difference is. Donald Trump ran what is basically a family company. He was the boss, and what he said got done.
Right.
He didn't run a public company with boards and committees and all the other things. Being the president of the United States is a lot more like running a public company than it is running a family-owned business.
True.
And the permanent government.
In the public company, you at least get some people around you that you like and like you.
What he called the deep state, which I regard as unnecessarily pernicious, I refer to as the permanent government. Agencies, programs, they have entrenched interests. They have the people who work there, the cabinet officials, the congressmen and senators who oversee, the lobbyists. That's a big fight to take on. Ronald Reagan came into office saying he was going to do three things: win the Cold War, fix the American economy, and restore the elan, the value the American people felt in their government. He did all three things. And those were three big things.
I know. But make your point because he also said he was going to get rid of the Department of Education. He was only 2 years old at that point. Come on now.
There were a lot of ancillary problems, but those were the three big things that Reagan was going to do.
Let's not compare the two as if this is...
Well, what I'm saying is that Trump came in promising to do a lot of things.
And he got a lot done.
He got a lot done.
Okay, Rick, I want to hear your point because
hard to build a coalition around your big ideas.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know that I agree with you 100% there. I think that is a bigger culture war. I think that the left, he put the left on notice that I'm going to get into this and drive a wedge through, and he didn't mind that it divided down to two sides. I'm just wondering if it's getting into a civil war.
If Donald Trump wasn't successful, the left would be leaving him alone right now. We wouldn't be having a commission. We wouldn't be having any of this stuff going on, because they would say he's the past. We're looking forward to the future. The reason they're going after Donald Trump is because he's the one person who showed the guts to stand up against
like you said,
the administrative state.
MAGAism is a movement.
I so agree with Rick,
a leader.
because I do think he represented a style of political pugilism that gave other members on Capitol Hill the courage and backbone to be able to stand up to some of these progressive policies. And it's why we're seeing the current administration swing the pendulum so far left so quickly in the first 8 months of their leadership.
But they're swinging it so far left, and then yet, like both of you made the point that it's going straight into the states. These people are not quitting. They're going to go and change their states.
But it's why. This is why. If you like Donald Trump's style of taking on problems head on, maybe a little crass, but taking on problems head on. Yeah, okay. I'm understating. But if that's what you like, you need to tell your Congress people, the people you elect, that they need to be taking on Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the administrative state itself, and directly. None of this nonsense of thinking we can play games like we did in the 1980s.
Well,
this is full contact. This isn't
but to Sarah's point then, so if the data was showing that people are not in agreement with what they're doing over here in this little investigation that we know is going to take as long as their whole, it was Russia scheme, and then go into next year's elections, why aren't they hearing from them? Or are they hearing from them? And we're just not hearing that they're hearing from them because, to Peter's point, the news has shut down on this one. They're on the other side.
Absolutely. And I think you are going to hear from them in 2022 and 2024. So I think we have yet to see how the theatrics of the modern democratic state are going to ultimately play out in the polls. I'm hopeful that the Republicans get their acts together, that they find the backbone that they had under Donald Trump, and that we see a sea change.
Oh, I think that we might do that. But I want to hear from Peter on that. Okay, so they're talking about on the political side of it. How about in the media? Are we ever going to get to the place where, they're shutting down media that disagrees on simple things like maybe there's a pill you might be able to take.
The internet has democratized, small d, democratized the media. It's, whereas you used to need to have millions to get a show on the air. Now you can get a show on the air for a few thousand. You buy a couple of cameras, a couple of microphones, get some lights, you have a show. You're on the internet. This then gets us into the question of whether or not the cancel culture that seems to be prevalent in Silicon Valley can get those shows off the internet. And you can do a whole nother show on that subject, but that's something that's going to be worked out through the courts, through Congress, through the Federal Trade Commission, through the Federal Communications Commission. Unfortunately, through the Biden era, where I'm worried about initiatives that they're going to take to censor ideas.
I know, but Rick, can they stop it? This sounds like a groundswell.
It is a groundswell.
I agree that MAGA, we saw the Tea Party and what they do. They went in an election booth and they got a leader, and now it's not over.
Let me tell you what needs to happen right now, and they can't stop it. Congress, the House of Representatives, will not be back in Washington, D.C. until September 20th.
Hallelujah.
Okay? That means, you know where they are?
We get to go outside and
well maybe. Don't go too far on that.
We wear masks.
But no, the point is...
They did that right after everybody leaves.
And right after the mayor's birthday party.
That's right. But the point that can't be missed is the members of Congress are in your hometown. They are there. If people care about this, now is the time to go to the district office and say, I want to talk to him. Why isn't Congressman X standing up and fighting on whatever you want him to stand up for, him or her?
That was one of my disappointments when Congressman Gohmert went over to see what's going on with the guys in the jail. Only 3 other congressmen came.
Right.
Where were? And so we were walking over to Cap Club after so that we could see if we could get some interviews over there, and ran into a couple of congressmen on the way. And they were like, "Huh? What's happening?" Maybe this.
That's what I've been
pressure.
saying. The problem isn't that there were 5 members who stood up.
Right.
The problem is that there were 430 members who did not, because innocence until proven guilty, due process rights are a bipartisan issue.
That is.
And the fact that you didn't have 435 members members saying, these people deserve to have their due process rights upheld. That's the most disturbing thing about the entire thing.
It is. And what was interesting is my Uber driver back from the jail, I was on the phone a little bit in the car, and so he just thought he was going to chime in on our conversation about how all these white people, only when white people are in jail, have a problem with them being in jail. I said, nobody's stopping those 60 Congressional Black Caucus members from finding out what's happening to those brothers in that same jail that they have now overcrowded. So, it's interesting that even in the Congress, we don't have people that are saying we need to stand up. So, Rick, I thank you for that point, because you guys heard it. It's time for them to go in and let their voice be heard, more than just in the election booth. Thank you, Sarah, because, we're going to see that groundswell, but maybe they need to hear from us as well. And I love your point, too, Peter, that we are the media now. And if they don't shut us out, we can make our voices heard everywhere. So I'll be right back. I have to bring a pastor into this discussion. As you know me now, that once it's intense, we have to see what thus saith the Lord. And so I have a dear friend. You know him already, but you won't get to see him again until after this break.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., Cure works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. Cure's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Cure. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
That was a pretty feisty panel. I think I was the most feisty, but I hope that you gleaned a lot of information from it, that we have real problems in our country. We're constitutionally out of order. Our society seems to be unraveling. So I want to talk to my pastor friend, Pastor McNeil. Thank you for joining us. Charles McNeil, you guys know him already. He's a pastor of Unity Baptist Church here in Washington, D.C., and he was a former police officer, too. Some of you may remember that, and that's why I love having you here, because you kind of know both sides of every story. You know what it's like to be on the beat, to be dealing with people's problems, but then in the pulpit, you know what it's like to be on the beat and deal with people's problems.
Yeah.
We're having problems. What can you say about where we are as a nation, and then are we going to be able to fix where we are as a nation?
Well, I think everyone just need to really take a calm approach. Okay. I understand the rhetoric on both sides, and we really need to just step back and be able just to communicate, to be able to listen. One of the biggest things that we have to do in this country now is to start listening. Listening, observing, instead of reacting to every statement. If I reacted to every statement that came out of my congregation, I would be completely crazy.
Oh, wow.
But it's just taking the time, step back, relaxing, and being able to see the other person's side.
But how? Because when you think about the breakdown is in worldview. We really do have the sacred, those that believe in personal responsibility, they believe in the Bible, and they have the secular, those that believe in collectivism, they believe that there's problems that they can fix through government and political, and these two tensions have come to a head here in Washington and frankly all over the country.
What's the common ground? The common ground is respect. Okay. And I think what we have to do is be able to sit down now and be able to say, hey, look, I respect your views, you respect my views. What is the common ground now that we can move this country forward? And I understand that.
I don't respect their views. I like the proverb where their views are an abomination to the just, and the justice are an abomination to them. And I don't know that there is that respect unless we sever our relationship. You know how it's people that get divorced, they say, we're better friends. We can't come together because our worldviews are too different. So I'm wondering then, in order to have that common ground, is it time to dismantle some of these public institutions, the schools, every place that we're forced to be in the same space, the affirmative action programs, the government, the retirement program. We've been forced over the last 56 years to touch our lives in places that now we're finding out two worldviews don't blend well together. So I'm just not sure. I mean, I know you're a pastor, and I should have said, okay, pastor. I'm one of those that will leave the pastor room and say, I'm not doing nothing. You just said that. But can we? Or are we at the moment right before a civil war?
Well, I don't believe that we're looking at a civil war.
You don't? After what happened last summer and what happened January 6th?
Well, I mean, I don't believe that I would not say a civil war per what we're looking at as we looked at the civil war that we had in this country.
So you don't think people are going to pick up arms? I think it will calm down?
I think we can calm that down.
Okay, we can calm it down.
I think there may be a civil war or civil war of ethics and morals.
Okay.
I believe that. But I don't think that we will get to a point where we're actually going to be ready to start killing each other.
Now, what if there are people that do that? Because people were saying that during the lead up to the Civil War. There was still discussion, even leading it up to the Revolutionary War, where everybody was just saying, can't we just all get along? We saw that even trying to stay out of World War II. I want to believe you. But I think that there are some that are really saying, you want to call us an insurrectionist? Then we're going to do that. I want to believe you, but there are some that believe so embeddedly the philosophy of Marx that they're ready to overhaul the whole country. What if these two groups get what they desire, and then the rest of us are sitting here still saying, can we all get along?
Well, there has to be some advancement and some evolution in humanity somewhere.
Okay.
And there has to be a starting point somewhere where we come together and say, hey, look, what is better now for this country? What is better for all races, black, white, Asian, Hispanic? What is the best part so that we will not tear this
that
apart?
the founding principles are the principles of Christianity, the virtues of capitalism, the rule of law that's in the Constitution. But a whole other side says, we hate all of that. Those guys were nothing but racists. We are never going to get along with you. And then we kept hearing it, and then it got intense, and then we had Trump, and then we got louder, and now you're saying, bring it down.
Yeah,
I'm running out of time, so give us a scripture. Give us something to say that it couldn't happen that way.
The Bible tells us to lay aside of all sin that so easily beset us and run the race that is set before us.
Okay.
And sometimes we have to look at that race not as a sprint, but as a cross-country marathon.
Wow.
We may not be able to get there, and we may not have all the same ideas and philosophies, but we should be able to run this race. And somewhere along those paths, we should be able to pick up some water of togetherness, some water of love, some juice of compassion, and then continue to run that race. There has to be some evolution somewhere.
I love you, Pastor. Oh, I'm telling you, the couples in his church are happy, I'm sure, because if that's the kind of insight they're getting from the pastor to say, this is how you make a marriage last 60 years. And that's the same principles I think I'm hearing you say about how we're going to let our country last into its future.
We're here now.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? We need to work together.
Well, let's hope
Conservatives, all of us, we need to work together.
I don't know. I'm going to leave it.
But I'm not saying that
and all I'm saying is that sometimes things get so divided that you have to rebuild somewhere else. So I'm gonna thank you. No, you're coming back. You have to come back. I'm over time a little on this and I went over time with our panel. So I have to have you back because this is not going to go away overnight.
Right.
And if what they were saying is true, that it's going to get more and more intensified, then I think that your voice is very important to calm it all down. Thank you for joining us this week on Cure America. I'll be back next week with another exciting show. And this issue, we'll continue to talk about into the future. Make sure that if you want to help us, that you visit our website, curepolicy.org. Give a little gift there so that we can continue to bring this to you, and share the show with your friends so that we can get these messages out, so we can sort through the noise of the news, find some truth. God bless you. God keep you. God shine his light of goodness on you, and that it will keep you in peace and safety. In Jesus' name.